His family kicked him out for being worthless. Until the lawyer read the last will and testament. The grand mahogany table in the opulent Valerius Estates drawing room felt less like a piece of furniture and more like an altar to avarice, polished to a gleam that reflected the unspoken desires of those gathered. Dust motes, ancient and undisturbed, danced like tiny, forgotten spirits in the thin, grudging slivers of sunlight that managed to pierce the heavy velvet curtains, illuminating the strained smiles and nervous fidgeting of Cassian Valerius's closest, and seemingly only, remaining family. A pervasive silence, thick with anticipation and thinly veiled impatience, clung to the air, broken only by the faint rustle of silk and the soft tap of a polished shoe. His granddaughter, Esmeralda, a woman whose life was a meticulously curated tapestry of social events, designer labels, and strategically placed charitable donations, adjusted the cuff of her silk blouse with a sharp, almost aggressive movement. Her eyes, usually so adept at conveying practiced charm, darted between the imposing closed oak door and the decrepit figure slumped in a heavy, high-backed armchair by the cold, unused fireplace. A frown, barely discernible, marred her perfectly smooth forehead, a fleeting expression of annoyance that quickly vanished behind her usual facade. Beside her, Thane, her brother, a man whose ambition had always dramatically outweighed his intellect, tapped an impatient rhythm against the armrest, his gaze, like his sister's, fixed on the same door. His foot, clad in an expensive but scuffed loafer, twitched with barely suppressed energy. The air thrummed, not with sorrow or remembrance, but with a palpable hunger, a greedy anticipation for the final pronouncement that would unlock their fortunes. "This farce has gone on long enough," Esmeralda finally whispered, her voice a brittle whisper, yet sharp enough to cut through the heavy silence like a shard of ice. Her eyes, narrowed with disdain, flickered towards the frail figure by the fireplace. "He barely knows his own name. What good is he doing here? He should be comfortable elsewhere." The unspoken sentiment, heavy in the room, was that elsewhere meant somewhere far away, out of sight, and certainly out of mind, a place where his presence would not inconvenience their acquisition of his vast fortune. Thane nodded, a quick, almost imperceptible jerk of his head. His expression was a mask of manufactured concern that barely concealed his true impatience, a thinly veiled eagerness for the proceedings to conclude. Indeed. The Valerius name, the legacy, it demands a certain decorum. This situation is unsustainable. He did not specify what situation he meant, but his contemptuous glance towards the frail old man, a flicker of disgust in his eyes, made it abundantly clear. The situation was Cassian himself, a living, breathing anachronism in their gleaming, modern world of effortless wealth. Cassian Valerius, or what appeared to be Cassian Valerius, stirred slightly in the armchair. His clothes were rumpled, a threadbare sweater and mismatched trousers, a stark contrast to the opulence surrounding him. His white hair, once immaculately groomed, was disheveled, and a faint, almost imperceptible tremor ran through his hand as he clutched a worn, stained blanket. His eyes, though clouded with an artificial haze that suggested senility, held a flicker of something far more lucid, far more knowing, than his family could ever imagine. He watched them, these two who bore his name, their faces etched with a blend of annoyance and barely contained greed. They believed him to be a hollowed-out shell, a burden to be discarded, a phantom of the man who had once commanded empires. A ghost in his own house, waiting for his final rites. A ghost, he knew, who was about to haunt their futures. A soft, almost tentative knock at the heavy oak door startled them, momentarily snapping their attention from their internal calculations. It opened quietly to reveal Mr. Alastair Finch, Cassian's longtime, impeccably dressed lawyer, his face a study in professional neutrality, unreadable as always. Behind him stood a young woman, Elara Vance, his legal assistant, her presence unassuming yet significant. Her expression was one of quiet empathy as her gaze fell upon Cassian, a genuine softness in her eyes that was notably absent in the faces of his grandchildren. "Good afternoon, Mr. Finch," Esmeralda chirped, her voice instantly sweeter, a socialite's practiced veneer sliding effortlessly into place. Her impatience was momentarily forgotten, replaced by a facade of polite deference. "Are we ready, then?" Mr. Finch offered a curt nod, his eyes briefly meeting Cashin's, a silent understanding passing between them, a shared secret held within the depths of their gazes. Then, in a voice that held the quiet weight of untold fortunes and a lifetime of legal gravitas, he began, "We are. As per Mr. Valerius's explicit instructions, we are gathered here today for the reading of his last will and testament." Thane shifted forward in his seat, a predatory glint in his eyes, his entire posture radiating eagerness. Esmeralda preened, a self-satisfied smirk playing on her lips, a small, almost imperceptible gesture of triumph. They saw only the end of a long, inconvenient chapter, the gateway to their unearned inheritance, a boundless future of luxury and power that they believed was rightfully theirs. Then, from the armchair, a voice, surprisingly clear and resonant, cut through the anticipation, slicing through the tension like a keen blade. It was Cashin Valerius, the worthless man, the decrepit figure they had scorned and dismissed. "No, Mr. Finch," he corrected, his voice no longer weak, no longer trembling, all traces of feigned frailty vanished. It was the voice of a man accustomed to giving orders, a voice that had shaped industries, commanded respect, and instilled fear in boardrooms across continents. "The game, as you call it, is over. It's time for the reveal." Esmeralda and Thane exchanged confused glances, their masks of polite impatience slipping instantly to reveal genuine bewilderment, then a dawning horror. They looked at the old man, then at each other, a silent question passing between them, was he having another episode? Was this just the ramblings of a senile old fool, a final, pathetic act of defiance? Little did they know, the disheveled figure before them held the keys not just to their opulent future, but to their utter, crushing destitution. The stage was set, the curtain was about to rise, and the truth that was about to be revealed was far more complex, and devastating, than they could ever comprehend. Cashin felt a quiet, grim satisfaction settle within him. The performance was about to yield its results. To understand Cashin Valerius's extraordinary deception, one had to delve into the very fabric of his being, a tapestry woven with threads of ruthless ambition, unparalleled foresight, and a profound, albeit often hidden, yearning for genuine connection. He was not born into wealth, he forged it from the raw materials of ingenuity and sheer, unyielding will. His early life was a stark landscape of scarcity and hard labor, growing up in a forgotten corner of the industrial belt where soot-stained skies were the norm and opportunity was a distant, unreachable dream. He had seen firsthand the corrosive effects of poverty and understood that true worth was earned, not inherited. From these humble beginnings, fueled by an insatiable drive, he had built a global empire, a conglomerate of unimaginable scale that spanned continents and industries, a testament to his belief that anything was possible with enough effort and cunning. Yet, as the decades passed and his fortune swelled to astronomical proportions, a creeping disillusionment began to settle in his heart, a quiet ache that no amount of success could quell. His wife, Eleanor, the true love of his life, a woman of quiet strength and profound empathy, had passed many years prior, leaving a void that no amount of wealth or power could ever fill. He had watched as his children, raised in comfort and shielded from the struggles that had forged him, had failed to inherit his drive, their lives characterized by quiet mediocrity and a comfortable, almost complacent reliance on his boundless largesse. They were kind, in their own way, but lacked the fire, the ambition, the understanding of true value beyond a monetary figure. It was his grandchildren, Esmeralda and Thane, however, who truly ignited the embers of his profound disappointment, turning it into a burning conviction. He had watched them grow, first with hope, then with growing dismay. He had seen the early flashes of intelligence in Esmeralda, her sharp wit and undeniable charm, and had dared to hope she might apply it to something meaningful. Instead, she had chosen a path of relentless social climbing, her every interaction a meticulously calculated step towards greater prestige, higher circles, and more exclusive events. She valued appearances above all else, seeing people not as individuals with their own stories and struggles, but as rungs on a ladder to her next lavish party or designer acquisition. Her calls to Cashin had grown progressively rarer, always punctuated by thinly veiled requests for financial assistance, or exasperated complaints about the inadequacy of her current allowance, as if he were a particularly slow-witted accountant rather than her grandfather. He saw through her superficial smiles, through the feigned interest in his health that vanished the moment a check was mentioned. Her gratitude was a performative act, a means to an end, a currency for further gain. Thane, on the other hand, had attempted to follow in Cashin's footsteps, but only superficially, mimicking the posture of a titan without possessing the internal fortitude. He lacked the Midas touch, the intrinsic understanding of markets, the courage to take calculated risks that had defined Cashin's career. Instead, he relied entirely on Cashin's connections, his name, his vast capital, presenting himself as a visionary while secretly leaning on his grandfather's every resource. Every business venture Thane embarked upon seemed to flounder without direct intervention from his grandfather, yet he would always claim sole credit for any minor success, trumpeting it as proof of his own genius. He viewed Cashin not as a mentor or a family member, but as an inexhaustible resource, a wellspring of funds and influence to be tapped at will, a golden goose waiting to be carved. His visits were infrequent, his conversations dominated by discussions of his own groundbreaking ideas that invariably required significant upfront investment from Cashin, often followed by frustratingly little return. The old man watched as Thane's once eager eyes grew cold, calculating, seeing only the balance sheet in front of him, never the human being, never the grandfather who had poured his lifeblood into building their future. Cashin had attempted, over the years, to impart lessons of humility, hard work, and compassion. He had subtly tried to guide them, to encourage them to find purpose beyond material gain, to understand that true fulfillment came from contribution, not consumption. But his words seemed to fall on deaf ears, echoing in the vast, empty halls of their self-absorption. The more wealth he accumulated, the more entitled they became, their sense of personal responsibility dwindling with each passing year, replaced by a growing expectation of effortless luxury. He saw the growing chasm between his own values and theirs, a gulf so wide it seemed impossible to bridge. They treated him as a benevolent ATM, a figurehead whose primary purpose was to fund their increasingly extravagant lives, a source of endless supply. Their affection, when it was offered, felt like a transactional obligation, a performance to ensure continued access to his immense fortune, a charade he grew to despise. The breaking point arrived subtly, not with a grand betrayal, but with a series of small, accumulating slights that chipped away at his remaining hope. The forgotten birthdays, the ignored calls when he feigned a minor illness to test their concern, the casual dismissal of his wisdom as the ramblings of an old man, the thinly veiled impatience during family gatherings where he dared to speak of anything other than their inheritances, their future plans for his money. He heard their hushed conversations, the speculative discussions about his advanced age and diminishing capacity, the thinly veiled eagerness for him to finally relinquish control, and his assets. A profound, chilling realization settled upon him. They were not waiting for him to live, they were waiting for him to die. They saw him not as a grandfather, but as an obstacle. It was then, in the quiet solitude of his sprawling estate, surrounded by the very symbols of the wealth that had poisoned his family, that a radical, audacious plan began to form in Cashin's mind. A test. A crucible to reveal the true metal of their character, to see if there was any true gold beneath the gilded surface. He would feign a complete, rapid decline, both mentally and physically. He would appear disoriented, disheveled, utterly destitute, a shadow of his former formidable self. He would move into the forgotten annex of his own estate, a crumbling, neglected wing that perfectly symbolized the decay he wished to project, a physical manifestation of the worthlessness he intended to embody. This would be his observation post, a hidden vantage point from which he could truly see their hearts, stripped bare of pretense. He meticulously planned every detail, every agonizing step of his self-imposed charade. He consulted his most trusted medical professionals, not to treat a real illness, but to understand how to convincingly simulate one, how to mimic the symptoms of advanced senility without causing himself actual harm. He worked with his longtime lawyer, Mr. Finch, a man of unwavering loyalty and discretion forged over decades of shared battles, to set up the parameters of his disappearance from public life, carefully crafting a narrative of rapid mental deterioration that would be believable to outsiders. He began to dress in ill-fitting, worn clothes, to let his hair grow unkempt and his beard scraggly, to adopt a shuffling gait that added years to his appearance. He practiced the vacant stare, the confused murmurs, the sudden bursts of senile frustration that would alienate those around him. It was to be the performance of a lifetime, a grand theatrical production with his family as the unwitting, principal actors, their true selves to be revealed under the harsh spotlight of his engineered crisis. His goal was simple, yet terrifying in its implications: to observe. To see if, when stripped of his power, his influence, his money, they would still see him as a human being worthy of basic dignity and care. He wanted to know if their love, if it could even be called that, was conditional, tied inextricably to his wealth, or if there was any flicker of genuine affection, any shred of compassion left within them. He knew the risk, that he might find nothing but the confirmation of his darkest fears, that he might discover a void where he had hoped for a spark. But the alternative, to die without knowing, to leave his legacy in the hands of those who would only squander it on shallow pursuits, was a torment he could not bear. He had built an empire, a monumental testament to his life's work, but now, he sought to build a legacy based on something more profound than mere currency, a legacy of truth, of character, and of discerning genuine human worth. The test would be brutal, for himself and for them, but the revelation, he knew, would be absolute. The transformation of Cassian Valerius was chillingly effective, a metamorphosis that was both heartbreaking and meticulously executed. What began as a subtle shift in his demeanor quickly escalated, guided by his meticulous plan and his unwavering resolve. Public appearances ceased, replaced by hushed rumors of his rapid failing health, whispered behind cupped hands in the city's exclusive clubs. His once impeccable attire was swapped for threadbare sweaters and mismatched trousers, garments that hung loosely on his once commanding frame. His sharp, analytical mind, once the envy of boardrooms and the engine of his vast empire, now seemed a tangled mess of half-formed thoughts and forgotten names. He began to wander the estate, muttering to himself, before retreating into the dilapidated West Annex, a wing of the estate that had been left untouched for decades, its grandeur fading under layers of dust, cobwebs, and neglect. This was his chosen stage, a stark contrast to the polished marble and crystal chandeliers of the main house, a physical manifestation of the worthlessness he now projected, a silent testament to his planned decay. Esmeralda and Thane's initial reactions were a predictable mixture of concern for their inheritance and thinly veiled annoyance at the inconvenience his condition presented. They would visit him in the annex, their faces contorted into expressions of forced sympathy, their eyes constantly scanning the room for signs of hidden wealth, or perhaps, for a quick, graceful exit. Their visits were short, perfunctory, performed more out of obligation than genuine concern. One crisp autumn morning, Esmeralda arrived, a designer scarf pulled tight around her neck as if to ward off the chill not just from the damp annex, but from the unpleasantness of his presence. Cassian sat by a dusty window, staring out at the overgrown gardens, humming a tuneless, mournful melody. "Grandfather?" Esmeralda called, her voice saccharine sweet, a stark contrast to the irritation simmering beneath. "How are you feeling today?" She held a small, elegantly wrapped box, ostensibly a gift, but one she seemed reluctant to bring too close to his rumpled clothes, as if contagion might pass from the worn fabric. Cassian turned slowly, his eyes seemingly unfocused, glazing over with the practiced fog of confusion. Who are you? Have I met you before?" You look like someone I know," he mumbled, allowing a faint, bewildered smile to cross his lips. Esmeralda's smile tightened, her perfect facade cracking slightly. "It's Esmeralda, grandfather. Your granddaughter." She forced a brittle chuckle. "Always so playful, aren't you?" She placed the box on a small, rickety table, well out of his reach, almost as if she feared he might touch it and diminish its value. "I brought you some artisanal chocolates. You always loved those." He knew, with a chilling certainty, that she knew he had a severe chocolate allergy, a fact she had either forgotten in her self-absorption or willfully ignored as a subtle act of malice. "Well, I must run. A charity gala. So much to do, you know. But I'll send someone to check on you." He watched her leave, a faint sigh escaping his lips. She never did send anyone. Thane's visits were equally devoid of genuine care, marked by an impatient pragmatism. He saw Cashin as a problem to be managed, a loose end that needed tying up before it became a greater liability. He would arrive with documents he claimed Cashin needed to sign, vague papers related to estate planning or asset protection, hoping to trick the old man into signing over more assets or perhaps to accelerate the transfer of control. "Grandfather," Thane boomed one afternoon, standing over Cashin who was attempting to untangle a knotted piece of string, a seemingly pointless task he had adopted. "We need to discuss your living arrangements. This annex, it's simply not suitable. For your safety, you understand." His eyes surveyed the peeling paint, the damp patches on the walls, and the general air of decrepitude with a shudder of profound disgust. "We found a wonderful facility. Quiet, peaceful. Far from the city. They specialize in elderly care." Cashin knew he meant a remote, low-cost institution, far enough away to be out of sight, out of mind, a place where the Valerius name wouldn't be sullied by his inconvenient existence. "It's for the best, truly. For the family's peace of mind." He saw Cashin as an embarrassing relic, a potential liability that threatened the pristine image of the Valerius name, and more importantly, his inheritance. The implicit threat was clear: comply, or be forcibly removed. Cashin, feigning confusion, merely grunted, pulling at the string with exaggerated effort. "String, important. Must keep the string." Thane scoffed, his patience worn thin, and left instructions with a reluctant housekeeper to persuade Cashin to pack his sparse belongings. The housekeeper, however, a kind woman who had worked for the Valerius family for decades, was secretly fond of the old man and quietly ignored Thane's cruel directive, providing small comforts instead. Cashin noted her small kindnesses, filing them away in his meticulously clear mind. The ultimate test, the one that cemented Cashin's resolve, came one frigid winter night. A pipe burst in the annex, flooding a section of Cashin's makeshift living quarters. He deliberately allowed himself to appear disoriented and trapped, calling out feebly for help, his voice thin and reedy. He heard Esmeralda's and Thane's voices from the main house, their muffled discussion drifting through the thin walls, debating whether to call a plumber or simply let the annex freeze over. "It's just the old annex, Esmeralda," Thane's voice drifted through the thin walls, laced with dismissive contempt. "Hardly worth the expense. Let's just turn off the water to that section. He'll be fine. He probably won't even notice." Esmeralda's reply, chilling in its indifference, followed soon after. "He's old. He probably doesn't even feel the cold anymore." Cashin spent a miserable night in a cold, damp room, listening to the relentless drips and the wind whistling through cracked window panes, his body aching from the feigned frailty, from the deliberate exposure. He shivered, not from the cold that gnawed at his bones, but from the chilling realization of their utter callousness. They were willing to let him suffer, even potentially perish from exposure, simply to avoid a minor inconvenience or expense. His heart, once so full of a lingering hope for his lineage, hardened further, solidifying his decision. It was during this period of deliberate neglect, this orchestrated isolation, that Alara Vance entered the picture. She was a legal assistant in Mr. Finch's office, bright, earnest, and relatively new to the intricate, often opaque world of the Valerius family affairs. Her background was modest, a stark contrast to the opulence of the estate. Her upbringing had instilled in her a deep sense of empathy and a strong work ethic, values that shone through her quiet demeanor. She had taken on a part-time job to help support her ailing mother, balancing her professional life with demanding personal responsibilities, her days a tireless juggle of duties. Unlike the seasoned professionals who had become jaded by the Valerius family's eccentricities and endless drama, Elara saw only a frail, neglected old man, not a symbol of forgotten wealth or a potential legal headache. Her first interaction with Cashin was when Mr. Finch, perhaps subtly guided by Cashin's unseen hand, sent her to deliver some routine, low-priority documents to the annex. She arrived, navigating the forgotten, overgrown paths leading to the crumbling wing, the air heavy with the scent of damp and decay. She found Cashin huddled in a threadbare armchair, tracing patterns on a dusty windowpane, seemingly lost in a world of his own. "Mr. Valerius," she asked softly, her voice gentle, devoid of the practiced pity or impatient condescension she had witnessed in others. She approached him with a respectful distance, her eyes taking in the dismal conditions. Cashin looked up, his eyes hazy, but a faint spark of curiosity, carefully hidden, flickered within them. He observed her, noting the genuine concern in her posture, the quiet assessment in her gaze. "I'm Elara Vance, from Mr. Finch's office. I just have some papers for you to look over, when you're able." She didn't press him, didn't rush him, simply placing the documents on a nearby, slightly cleaner surface. She noticed the biting coldness of the room, the absence of a proper meal, the general air of abandonment that hung heavy in the air. Without a word, driven by an innate desire to alleviate discomfort, she found a broom in a forgotten closet and began to sweep the dust from a corner, then retrieved a small, portable space heater she found nearby, plugging it in. The small act, a simple gesture of kindness, brought a faint warmth to the room, and an even fainter, deeper warmth to Cashin's guarded heart. From then on, Elara began to make small, unauthorized detours to the annex during her workdays, driven by a quiet concern she couldn't ignore. She would bring him a thermos of hot tea, a warmed scone she had bought with her meager lunch money, a clean, folded blanket. She would sit with him, not demanding conversation, not seeking information, but simply being present, a quiet, calming presence in his engineered solitude. She'd read him snippets from the newspaper, ignoring his seemingly nonsensical interjections, treating his ramblings with a patient understanding that belied her age. She noticed his peculiar habit of collecting small, seemingly insignificant objects, a smooth stone, a colorful button, a bent paperclip, and instead of dismissing them as the eccentricities of a senile mind, she would ask him about them, listening with genuine interest as he rambled about their importance, seeing meaning in his fragmented narratives. She saw a human being, not a burden, not a symbol of forgotten wealth, but someone worthy of respect and kindness, a soul in distress. One afternoon, she found him shivering uncontrollably, a low fever taking hold, his feigned frailty becoming perilously close to real illness. The heating in the annex was sporadic at best, and no one from the main house, despite numerous calls, seemed to care. Instead of contacting Esmeralda or Thane, who would undoubtedly dismiss it as another episode or an attempt to gain attention, Elara quietly contacted a local, discreet doctor she knew from her mother's care, paying for the consultation out of her own meager savings. She bought him simple, nourishing food, and sat by his side, administering medication, her hand gently resting on his forehead, a gesture of maternal care that moved him deeply. "You're a good girl, Elara," Cashin rasped, his voice momentarily clear, his eyes piercing through the feigned fog with a startling lucidity. He quickly reverted to his confused state, but the words, and the profound look that accompanied them, resonated with Elara, a moment of profound, inexplicable connection that transcended their assumed roles. While Esmeralda and Thane were busy planning their next lavish vacation or their next futile business venture, consumed by their self-serving desires, Elara was ensuring Cashin had a warm meal and a clean shirt, quietly attending to his most basic needs. While they plotted to have him institutionalized, out of their way, Elara was advocating for his comfort, ensuring his basic needs were met, often at personal sacrifice, without thought of reward. She knew nothing of the vast Valerius fortune, only that this old man was alone, vulnerable, and deserving of compassion. This stark, undeniable contrast between the calculating cruelty of his blood and the selfless kindness of a stranger was etching an indelible truth into Cashin's soul, shaping the final, momentous decision regarding his vast legacy. The game was indeed in motion, and the players were revealing their true colors, unaware that their performance was being judged by the ultimate arbiter, the very man they had written off as worthless. The day of the will reading arrived with a solemnity that belied the simmering tensions beneath the surface, a fragile peace before the coming storm. The main drawing room of the Valerius estate was filled with an expectant hush, the air thick with unspoken avarice. Esmeralda and Thane sat side by side on an antique velvet settee, their faces carefully composed, a delicate balance of feigned grief and barely contained anticipation. They had dressed impeccably, as if for a funeral that was also a coronation, their designer clothes a testament to the future they believed awaited them. They occasionally cast disdainful glances towards the armchair by the cold fireplace, where Cashin, still in his disheveled state, sat slumped, seemingly oblivious to the gravity of the occasion, a prop in their grand drama. Elara Vance sat quietly in a corner, having accompanied Mr. Finch, her presence barely acknowledged by the Valerius siblings, who saw her as mere staff. She looked at Cashin with a pang of sadness, her heart aching for the old man who seemed so lost, so utterly defeated. Mr. Finch cleared his throat, adjusting his spectacles, his gaze sweeping across the room. Members of the Valerius family, friends, and esteemed colleagues, we are gathered here today to fulfill the final wishes of Cashin Valerius. His gaze swept across the room, lingering for a fraction of a second on Cashin, a subtle, knowing nod passing between them, a silent signal. Thane shifted impatiently in his seat, his leg twitching. "Mr. Finch, if we could just get to the relevant parts. We've all been through quite a lot." His tone conveyed an almost aggressive eagerness, a thinly veiled demand for the main event. Esmeralda chimed in, her voice laced with a saccharine sympathy that rang hollow. "Indeed. My grandfather, bless his heart, was not himself these past few months. We trust everything is in order, given his condition." Her tone implied a thinly veiled challenge, a suggestion that the will might be contested due to Cashin's supposed incapacity, an attempt to lay groundwork for future legal battles should things not go their way. Mr. Finch's lips thinned almost imperceptibly, a fleeting sign of his own quiet disapproval. "Rest assured, Ms. Valerius, every detail has been meticulously attended to. Mr. Valerius's faculties, at the time of drafting and executing this final document, were remarkably sound." He paused, letting the implication hang in the air, a subtle warning that went unnoticed by the self-absorbed siblings. He began to read, his voice clear and resonant, detailing the vastness of Cashin's empire, the multinational corporations spanning every continent, the extensive real estate holdings in global capitals, the formidable investment portfolios generating unimaginable returns, the priceless art collections acquired over a lifetime. Esmeralda and Thane exchanged excited glances, their eyes gleaming with visions of unimaginable wealth, yachts, private jets, endless designer shopping sprees, and business deals that would cement their social standing forever. They could almost taste the future. As Mr. Finch reached the section on the distribution of assets, a palpable tension filled the room, replacing the earlier impatience with growing unease. He spoke of substantial charitable foundations, of generous endowments to universities, of significant bequests to long-time loyal employees, even to the kind housekeeper who had ignored Thane's cruel directive. The names of Esmeralda and Thane had yet to be mentioned in any significant capacity. Their smiles began to waver, replaced by growing unease, then a flicker of panic. "And now," Mr. Finch announced, his voice taking on a new, deliberate cadence, the air in the room seeming to thicken, to the core of Mr. Valerius's final wishes regarding his direct descendants. Just as he was about to continue, Cashin Valerius, the seemingly senile old man, pushed himself up from the armchair with a sudden, decisive movement. The worn blanket fell away, revealing a surprisingly strong frame beneath the rumpled clothes, muscles toned from a lifetime of quiet discipline. His back straightened, his shoulders squared, his posture radiating an undeniable power. The artificial tremor in his hands vanished, replaced by a steady, unwavering resolve. His eyes, once clouded and vacant, now blazed with an intelligent, piercing intensity that swept over his bewildered grandchildren, holding them captive in their seats. Esmeralda gasped, a small, choked sound, her hand flying to her mouth, her perfect composure shattering. Thane's jaw dropped, his face paling to an ashen gray as he recognized the sharp, unwavering gaze that had once commanded boardrooms, the same intimidating presence that had built an empire. It was the look of Cassian Valerius, the titan, the strategist, the man they thought was gone, reduced to a pathetic shell. He was very much here. "The game is indeed over," Cassian stated, his voice now booming, full of authority, resonating through the opulent room, filling every corner. "And the results are in." He walked, with a firm, steady gait, towards the bewildered Esmeralda and Thane. There was no trace of frailty, no sign of confusion, no lingering hint of the senility he had so masterfully feigned. He was every inch the formidable industrialist who had built an empire from nothing, his presence alone enough to command absolute silence. "You two," Cassian said, his voice laced with an icy disdain, each word a hammer blow, "have proven yourselves beyond a shadow of a doubt." He paused, allowing the crushing weight of his words to settle upon them. "You have proven to be the very antithesis of everything I ever valued. Greed. Callousness. A complete absence of empathy. You saw an old man, vulnerable and in need, and you saw only a burden. A drain on your imagined future. You were willing to let me freeze, to starve, to be institutionalized, simply to avoid minor inconvenience, simply to hasten your inheritance. You measured my worth in dollars, and found me wanting when I appeared to have none left." Esmeralda stammered, her voice a fractured whisper, "Grandfather, what is this? Are you, well? This is simply not." Her mind raced, grasping for an explanation, a way to salvage the situation. "Silence." Cassian's voice cracked like a whip, sharp and commanding, silencing her instantly, her half-formed protest dying in her throat. "For months, I feigned decline. For months, I observed. And for months, you, my own flesh and blood, confirmed my deepest fears. You proved yourselves unworthy of the name Valerius, and certainly unworthy of the legacy I built with my own 2 hands. Thane, his face a ghastly shade of gray, finally found his voice, a strangled, desperate sound. "This is outrageous. You can't. This is a trick. You're senile. The will can be contested." He rose slightly from his seat, a flicker of defiance in his eyes, clutching at straws. Cassian allowed himself a slight, ironic smile, a ghost of his former, ruthless self. "Oh, it can it? Tell me, Thane, how will you contest a will that was drafted and signed, under the strictest legal supervision, by a man who was perfectly lucid, perfectly aware, and perfectly capable? Every interaction, every word exchanged, every moment of your callous disregard, it was all recorded. Documented. Your attempts to have me committed, your discussions about my worthlessness, all of it is evidence of your true character, and my undeniable lucidity." His gaze was unblinking, unwavering, stripping them bare of their pretenses. He turned back to Mr. Finch, a look of profound respect in his eyes. "Mr. Finch, if you would be so kind as to finish reading my last will and testament." Mr. Finch nodded, a slight, knowing smile on his face, a silent acknowledgement of Cassian's brilliance. He picked up a second, thinner document, its crisp pages a harbinger of doom for 2 of the people in the room. "Indeed. What I have just read was Mr. Valerius's former will, the one you believe to be current, the one that would have passed to you by default. However, a new, and final, will was executed just last week, witnessed and notarized with full legal compliance." The color drained from Esmeralda and Thane's faces completely. This was the climax, the moment of absolute, crushing truth, the hammer blow they had unknowingly invited. The old man, whom they had scorned and discarded, was not just lucid, he was a vengeful titan, a cunning strategist who had played them perfectly. Mr. Finch began to read from the new document, his voice ringing with quiet, absolute authority, each word a nail in their coffin. To Esmeralda Valerius and Thane Valerius, my grandchildren, I bequeath nothing more than the profound regret that they chose avarice over family, and the bitter lesson that true wealth is found not in possessions, but in compassion. Their actions during my final test have irrevocably severed any claim they may have had to my estate, or to my name. They shall receive $1 each, a symbolic reminder of their true worth in my eyes, and a testament to the emptiness of their characters. A collective gasp rippled through the few other employees and distant relatives present in the room. Esmeralda let out a strangled cry, a sound of pure, unadulterated anguish and loss, her world imploding around her. While Thane collapsed back into his chair, a defeated moan escaping his lips, his face ashen, his opulent dreams shattered into a million pieces around them. Cashin, however, was not finished. He turned to Elara, who had watched the entire scene unfold with wide, disbelieving eyes, her hand flying to her mouth in shock. And to Elara Vance, Cashin announced, his voice softening, yet still powerful, filled with warmth and genuine affection, who, despite knowing nothing of my true identity or my vast fortune, showed me kindness, empathy, and genuine human compassion when my own family showed me only scorn and neglect. You treated me not as a burden, but as a person worthy of dignity, a human being. You are the embodiment of the values I hold dear, values that my own blood has forgotten, values that are truly priceless. He gestured grandly around the opulent room, his hands sweeping over the priceless antiques and exquisite works of art. Elara Vance, this entire estate, the Valerius Group, all associated assets, my personal fortune, and indeed, the entirety of my legacy, estimated to be in the tens of billions of dollars, is hereby bequeathed to you, to be managed by a trust overseen by Mr. Finch, with the sole directive that it be used for philanthropic endeavors and to create opportunities for those who, like yourself, possess a rare and invaluable quality, a truly good heart. Elara stood, trembling, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a cry, tears welling in her eyes. She could not breathe, could not comprehend the magnitude of what she was hearing. The world tilted on its axis, her modest life irrevocably transformed. The Valerius siblings, on the other hand, screamed. Their carefully constructed world had imploded, reduced to ashes by the man they had dismissed as worthless. The mask had fallen, and the true judge had delivered his final, unequivocal verdict, a devastating blow to the undeserving, and an unimaginable blessing to the truly compassionate. The immediate aftermath of Cashin Valerius's bombshell revelation was a chaotic symphony of disbelief, fury, and utter despair. Esmeralda's initial gasp quickly escalated into a high-pitched shriek, her perfectly manicured hands flying to her face as if to physically ward off the catastrophic truth. "This is a nightmare," she wailed, tears streaming down her face, not of sorrow for Cashin, but of pure, unadulterated rage and the profound loss of her anticipated fortune. "You cannot do this. I am your granddaughter. Your blood. This is a disgrace." She lunged towards Cashin, her elegant composure completely shattered, her eyes blazing with a fury that bordered on madness, only to be gently but firmly intercepted by Mr. Finch's stoic security detail, who had been strategically placed around the room. Thane, meanwhile, was a picture of silent, defeated fury. His face, already pale, now took on a greenish hue, a sign of profound nausea. He sank deeper into his armchair, his eyes wide and vacant, staring at the opulent surroundings that were no longer his. The vision of his future, once so clear and glittering, had evaporated like mist, replaced by the stark reality of financial ruin. He had built his entire identity around being the heir to the Valerius Empire, a ruthless businessman in the making, a man of power and influence. Now, he was nothing more than a man with a string of failed ventures, saddled with debt, and stripped of the very name that had given him any semblance of power. He knew, with a sickening certainty, that his business associates, who had always tolerated his mediocrity because of his grandfather's influence, would now abandon him entirely. The social circles he so desperately clung to would inevitably mock his spectacular downfall, his humiliation complete and inescapable. Mr. Finch, with the calm efficiency of a seasoned professional, stepped forward. He presented them with the legal documents, proving Cashin's full mental capacity beyond a doubt, and then, the meticulous recordings of their dismissive and cruel behavior towards their grandfather. There was no room for denial, no legal loophole to exploit. The evidence was overwhelming, irrefutable, and damning, a chilling testament to their true characters. Their lawyers, who had been waiting outside for the expected celebratory meeting where they would discuss the swift transfer of assets, now entered, their faces grim as they reviewed the documents presented by Mr. Finch. Their advice was succinct and brutally honest, contestation was futile. Their clients had lost everything. Esmeralda and Thane were ejected from the estate, not with ceremony, but with a quiet, firm finality. They were given a small allowance to cover basic living expenses for a few months, a final, ironic act of kindness from Cashin, a small safety net before the plunge, and nothing more. Their luxurious apartments, their expensive cars, their entire lifestyles built on anticipated inheritance, were gone. They were left to face the world not as the privileged heirs they believed themselves to be, but as two individuals utterly unprepared for the harsh realities of self-reliance. Esmeralda's social climbing became a precipitous fall, no one wanted to be seen with the disgraced Valerius heiress, her name now synonymous with scandal and greed. Thane's business ventures collapsed like a house of cards, his reputation in tatters, his connections severed, his phone silent. They were forced to sell off their remaining few possessions, their lives reduced to a humiliating struggle for basic survival, a stark contrast to the opulence they had once flaunted. Their punishment was not just financial, but reputational and existential, a complete stripping away of their manufactured identities. They had scorned true worth, and now they found themselves utterly worthless in the eyes of the world they once dominated. Elara Vance, meanwhile, was in a state of profound shock, a quiet, almost reverent disbelief. She had listened to Mr. Finch read the will, her mind struggling to process the staggering numbers, the unthinkable scale of the inheritance. She, a legal assistant earning a modest salary, who worried about her mother's medical bills and the cost of groceries, who had budgeted every penny, was now the recipient of billions. Her knees buckled, and she had to lean on a nearby chair for support, her vision blurring with unshed tears. Mr. Valerius. I don't understand, she stammered, her voice barely a whisper, a tremor running through her. This is impossible. I just brought you tea. I just swept your floor. Cashin walked over to her, his gaze warm and clear, a gentle smile on his lips. You brought me more than tea, Elara. You brought me humanity. You saw me when no one else did. You offered kindness when my own family offered scorn. You treated a worthless old man with dignity, with respect, with genuine care. And for that, you are worthy of far more than you can imagine, far more than this fortune. Mr. Finch stepped forward, his eyes twinkling with a rare warmth. The Valerius Group, Elara, is now under your purview, managed by a carefully constructed trust designed for maximum philanthropic impact. Your role will be to oversee its transition into a global philanthropic entity, focusing on initiatives that champion human dignity, education, and compassionate care for the elderly, just as you showed Mr. Valerius. You will have full access to resources, and your salary will be commensurate with the enormity of this responsibility, but your true reward will be in the profound good you can do for the world. Elara's mind reeled, a whirlwind of possibilities. She thought of her mother, now able to receive the best care, free from financial worry. She thought of the countless elderly individuals like Cashin, living in neglect and isolation, forgotten by society. She thought of the young people struggling to afford an education, denied opportunities because of circumstance. A wave of overwhelming emotion washed over her, disbelief, immense gratitude, and a profound, daunting sense of responsibility. She, who had nothing, now had everything. And she knew, with every fiber of her being, that she would use it to honor the man who had seen her true worth in the darkness, who had entrusted her with his life's work. The scales of justice, often slow and imperceptible, had finally tipped, delivering a devastating blow to the undeserving and an unimaginable blessing to the truly compassionate. Months turned into a year, then two, and the ripples of Cassian Valerius's final, audacious act spread far and wide, reshaping lives and legacies across the globe. Cassian himself, now fully restored to his formidable self, overseeing the transition of his empire with quiet satisfaction, his days filled with purpose. He established the Valerius Compassion Foundation, with Alara Vance at its helm, a testament to his values and her character. Under her thoughtful and diligent leadership, the foundation blossomed into a beacon of hope, funding pioneering research into elder care, establishing dignified assisted living facilities that prioritized human connection and comfort over cold efficiency, and creating educational scholarships for underprivileged youth who demonstrated not just academic promise, but also a profound sense of empathy and community spirit. Alara, once a timid legal assistant, had transformed into a powerful, respected philanthropist, her humility and genuine warmth touching countless lives, a quiet force for good. She was still Alara, quiet and kind, but now armed with the resources to effect monumental change, to turn compassion into tangible action. Cassian often visited the Foundation's projects, observing Alara's quiet dedication, her unwavering commitment, a serene contentment settling over him. He had found his true heir, not by blood, but by character, a legacy of kindness rather than commerce. Esmeralda and Thane, on the other hand, had become cautionary tales whispered in hushed tones in the very social circles they once craved. Their fall from grace was absolute and unforgiving. Esmeralda, unable to maintain her extravagant lifestyle, her credit lines exhausted, found herself working in a low-paying retail job, folding clothes in a discount store, her once sparkling eyes now dull with resentment and bitterness. Her social media, once a curated exhibition of luxury and exclusivity, was now barren, a ghost of a life she no longer possessed, a silent monument to her vanity. She blamed everyone but herself, forever trapped in a cycle of self-pity and anger, unable to learn the bitter lessons fate had dealt her. Thane, his reputation irrevocably tarnished, his name anathema in business circles, struggled to find any meaningful employment. His attempts at starting new ventures inevitably failed, lacking the Valerius name and capital to prop them up, revealing his inherent lack of acumen. He drifted from one desperate scheme to another, his arrogance slowly eroding under the weight of constant failure and mounting debt. He became a recluse, haunted by the specter of his lost fortune and the crushing realization that he had squandered his only true asset, his grandfather's affection, however conditional it had been. The Valerius name, once a badge of honor, became a mark of shame, a brand of failure. They were living proof that inherited wealth, without inherent worth or character, was merely a fleeting illusion, easily dissolved. Cassian Valerius lived out his remaining years with a profound sense of peace, a quiet triumph in his heart. He had not only built an empire, a monument to his ingenuity, but he had also, in the twilight of his life, ensured that its vast resources would be used to cultivate the very qualities his own family had lacked. He had proven that one's true character is not revealed in times of prosperity, but in the crucible of adversity, when all facades crumble. He had tested the bonds of blood and found them wanting, yet discovered a deeper connection with a stranger who exemplified the very best of humanity. His legacy was secured, not in the hands of those who merely shared his name, but in the heart of one who shared his values. And so, the story of Cassian Valerius serves as a powerful reminder that while the world often celebrates fortune and lineage, true worth is rarely found in grand estates or inherited titles. It resides in the quiet acts of kindness, in the unseen moments of compassion, and in the unwavering empathy shown when there is nothing to gain. For it is only in the darkness, when all superficial facades are stripped away, that the brightest stars of human character truly shine, illuminating a path towards a legacy far more valuable than gold, the legacy of a genuinely good heart, which, as this tale so powerfully demonstrates, will always find its reward. If this story of betrayal and unexpected kindness resonated with you, you're in the right place. Our channel is dedicated to bringing you more compelling tales of human nature, where justice often finds its own unique way. Don't miss out on our next deep dive into the lives of those whose true colors are revealed in the most unexpected ways. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you're the first to know when a new story drops. We'd love to hear your thoughts on Cashin's extraordinary plan. What do you think was the most shocking moment of the reveal? And if you were in Alara's shoes, what would be the first philanthropic project you'd tackle? Let us know in the comments below. Your insights and opinions truly enrich our community.